black neon tetra is one of my favorite schooling nano fish. Watching their electric blue stripes flash through the water as they voraciously nip for food is a joy. While this group has thrived for years in the Crystal Mine Aquarium, I had the itch to create something new for them. An environment with greater biodiversity where I could see them better. My vision for that was a natural-looking, layered sunken cave system, smothered by roots designed to highlight their movement and beauty as they weave through hidden passages. There are a few reasons this all came to be. First, I wanted to dismantle their current home, but why? Well, let's take a closer look. It's been an enjoyable, fairly low maintenance setup to have around, and 3 years later, it's still flourishing. The plant growth from the beginning till now is night and day, or maybe I should say day and night. I can't even remember the last time I trimmed anything, maybe about 6 months ago. All that matters is it looks wild now, which I quite enjoy. However, failing to prune the riparian plants above the rim has significantly shaded the aquatic world. Many of the leaves have browning edges as well, but that's alright. The foliage just doesn't look as good as it would have with maintenance. Even so, the root systems are immaculate and easily one of my favorite parts of the tank. After all, when I set it up, I included spiderwood for this very reason, imagining the two working together to create a cohesive look. Seeing that come to fruition did not disappoint, and besides looking amazing, the fish seemed to enjoy swimming through it too. Excluding the Java fern, which for whatever reason refuses to grow in my water, all of the aquatics did well. However, since I knew I'd be redoing this at some point soon, I've been pulling Anubias and crypts for other designs, so it's sparser than it has been in times past. Even with all the roots and plant coverage, I think the tetra's favorite place is behind the rock formations. That's partly why I wanted to redo this. I was certain I could achieve a better balance with a more elaborate hardscape. Something that would allow them to continue retreating, yet in a way that they remain visible. Speaking of hidden fish, they can't hold a candle to the banjo catfish. After going into the tank, it burrowed into the sand, where it remained under the radar for nearly a year. It did eventually re-emerge though, and since then, I see it quite often. I suspect that the reason for that is because of the tetras. They've bred a few times, and only a few have grown up. The others, strangely disappeared, and I believe the catfish is the culprit. Additionally, this school has dwindled over time as the initial group from 2022 has aged out. Unfortunately, they only live for around 3 to 5 years, which is why I wanted to add more fish to the group. Now, the idea of having glowing quartz is an iteration of a concept I first explored in the Crystal Gems Aquarium and revised in the New Ancient Ruins tank. While I enjoyed it, I thought it was time to move on from the concept and focus on something more naturalistic. That brings me to another reason why I wanted to make something new: extra materials. There's no arguing that these fish look amazing with black lava rock, and I just so happen to have buckets of it from several decommissioned tanks, meaning that I could combine these with elements from their current tank to create a completely different hardscape. One that's more focused on fish activity than holding crystals. What I was imagining would also look amazing with all the roots and spiderwood, which I could theoretically move from here to the new design, thus achieving a seasoned look from go. Finally, an aquarium perfectly suited for the described vision just opened up, specifically the Beta Antuta aquarium from last year. I was tired of battling cyanobacteria in it, which you can see the remnants of here. Of course, the fish didn't seem to mind, and I moved all of the wild type betas into other setups as part of a larger project anyway. I'm sure it's obvious what's going on here, but I'll let you fill in the blanks until that comes to full fruition. Now, with a solid idea of what I wanted to achieve, all I had to do was thoroughly clean this tank. It's a custom-built 22-gallon aquarium, measuring 36 inches wide, 12 inches deep, and 12 inches tall. The build process for that is all outlined in the previously mentioned beta video. When I set it up for that, I used these little puck lights. They do well and I like them, but given the height of the riparian plants from the other tank, I needed something else to accommodate them. My best option ended up being a linear light on adjustable mounts. With that, I could finally bring this idea to life. First, I set an egg crate foundation to prevent the stones from creating pressure points that could crack the glass. Maybe unnecessary with lava rock, but these large pieces do have some decent weight to them, so better safe than sorry. I had originally used these for the living fern rock, then the minimalist mountainscape, and most recently the no-filter guppy aquarium. Now they'd become a key element for this design, which I think is pretty cool. The plan here was to build off of these with smaller stones and branches to create pass-throughs for the fish. The easiest way to create those pass-throughs was with the pointed end of the stone facing down. Yet this made it top heavy, so I had to stabilize it with foam and a large piece of spider wood. However, I didn't like how it looked, so I swapped it out for another, which was an improvement, though I had to do more rock work before it could stay. Besides that, this was one of those scapes that just kinda came together without much thought. Really, the only challenging part was elevating the larger stones on smaller ones to create the arches. The key was aligning similar textures to produce a stable structure. Then I could reinstate the driftwood. It looked even better this time. I also slipped this smaller one below the rocks. These doubled as a platform for other stones to rest on. Again, my entire idea behind this was for the branches to work together with the plant roots to create something intriguing and cohesive. It came together quickly, but before I could go beyond this point, I had to weather the flat end of this branch. After carefully pulling it from the scape, I clamped it in a vise and created a weathering effect with a sawzall and pliers. Then I finalized the look with a wire brush drill bit. I know it may not look like much on camera, but I felt like it made a huge difference. I added a few more details after this, which made me feel confident enough in this layout to begin stabilizing it with pond foam. The beauty of using it in a design like this is that after it cures and the excess is removed, the porous interior closely matches the appearance of lava rock. With the newly added stability, I could remove the foam from before and add a few more details. Finally, I trimmed around the stones to eliminate excess egg crate, and like that, the initial hardscape was complete. With all of the caves and crevices I wanted, it was a good start, but it would look even better with more detail. Prior to adding those, I filled the aquarium. I normally wouldn't do this so early in the process, but I knew it would be much easier to transfer everything from the other tank into this one if it had water. The tetras are agile, so I wasn't worried about working around them, but I had to be mindful of the banjo catfish. Thankfully, it was buried in an area up front that I didn't have to disturb. I never really find any joy in ruining all of the progress, yet it's exciting to make something new that's going to have potential of its own. I began by removing the small spiderwood branches, and in the process, a few of the Anubias. One of which was rooted directly into a stone, which I thought was pretty cool. These looked amazing in their new home, too. However, the detail spiderwood is what truly took things to the next level. I wedged them between the stones while following the direction of the elements I had already established. When I talk about hardscape, I often discuss the need for variation in elements to help establish a sense of scale. This is a perfect example of that and kind of the philosophy behind this entire design. The small branches and roots work together with the larger ones to create something more appealing. Otherwise, if everything were similarly sized, it would look too homogeneous. With those in place, I could pull the rest of the Anubias, and I ended up with quite the pile. These are easily one of the best plants for this style of setup. Being epiphytes, they'll grow directly onto surfaces, and more importantly, they don't require much light. That's because all the hardscape coverage, riparian foliage, and roots will create a low light environment similar to the old tank. More demanding plants just wouldn't last under such conditions. Plus, there's just something about the combination of lava rock, spiderwood, and Anubias that just looks right. The riparian plants were rooted together and around the scape, so removing them intact was a balancing act for sure. Because the roots are intended to be a part of the design and I wanted them to look seasoned right away, I couldn't trim them like I usually would. Instead, I wove them through the hardscape. Most of what I'm adding here are syngoniums, which produce incredible roots in the aquarium. They get fairly large, and their darker color closely resembles spiderwood. While some of the other plants, like this Phytonia, have finer roots which you'll see later. Even though I didn't trim the roots, I did clean up the leaves. All of the browning resulted from direct contact with the light, which wouldn't have happened if I had trimmed them sooner. Again, not really a big deal, but a good reminder of why it's beneficial to periodically trim. I also added a few new plants, like this fern. Afterward, the transfer was nearly complete. We like snails around here, so I did my best to round up as many of those as I could. I also carefully pulled the catfish from the sand, which I find is easiest to do by hand. That meant I could freely remove the crypts. Getting the tetras in this state, on the other hand, would be nearly impossible, so I dismantled the hardscape. It came apart quite easily, and after draining most of the water, I could easily round them up by hand. Before I could actually add them to the tank though, I had one more thing to do. Having this full of water as I worked made it simple to keep the plants hydrated and weave the roots through the hardscape. However, I knew it would make adding the substrate behind the scape a challenge. Instead, I piled it up front and then sprayed it back into the crevices as I refilled. It would have been much easier to do all of this prior to scaping altogether, but I wanted to use the substrate from their old tank to keep the cycle going. Additionally, I put the media from the hang-on back filter into this one's canister. All of that left things a little cloudy, but that's alright. I knew the animals wouldn't mind, especially the snails, whom I added first. Next up was the lone banjo catfish. Now, don't let its placid demeanor fool you. Trust me, it's alive and well. Then came the existing group of black neon tetras, who unsurprisingly all retreated into the hardscape. I made it specifically so they could do that, so I didn't mind. Afterward, I allowed the tank to sit overnight before doing anything else. The aquarium cleared up significantly by the next day, though it was desolate because the fish were hiding within the scape, including the catfish. Since I could see its tail poking out from under the Anubias, I knew I could safely replant the crypts, so I got to work. I also decided to add some Susvassertong for a few more inhabitants, cherry shrimp. These specific shrimp are too large for the catfish to bother, but the shrimplets they'll produce won't be. However, given their prolific nature and ability to colonize this plant and lava rock as they grow, I'm confident they'll conquer this environment regardless. I wanted to add a few more ferns too, specifically lemon button ferns. I really enjoy how they're growing in the Endler aquarium and thought they'd look great here. Now then, I could finally add the new tetras. My hope and expectation were for the original 7 to now feel safe in numbers. These ones looked incredible in their new home, but it took a moment for them to begin exploring. However, their presence immediately caught the attention of the now curious fish, who quickly joined the school. Others were a little more skeptical. Thankfully, that changed when the fish filed out into the rest of the tank. All of this activity continued for the next few minutes as the fish joined together. The commotion even caught the catfish's attention. The question still remains, did all of this create a better balance with the fish? As far as the design goes, I believe it showcases them more effectively while providing them with the hiding places they enjoy, even if those ended up being more secluded than I had planned. I can't complain though because they're far more visible than before, so the answer's gotta be yes. Additionally, it's no secret that I enjoy using riparian plants for their filtering power. Oh yeah, I nearly forgot to show you those Photonia roots I talked about earlier. You can see here how much different they look. Anyway, I rarely get to showcase their roots like this, and doing so, in my opinion at least, creates something quite appealing that also provides usable habitat for the animals. Getting a somewhat seasoned look right away always helps too, but I'm certain that it will get even better with time. If you enjoyed this video, you'll also like the time I made a giant ecosystem pond tank for my guppies, and when I made a no-filter drop-off aquarium. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.